us. Let's speak to Georgia Gilholy this morning, political commentator and contributor to Young Voices UK. Georgia, good morning.
Good morning.
Should the Prime Minister be in charge at the next election?
If you're asking for my personal opinion...
Always.
I think that he's certainly crossed the line when it comes to misleading the public, misleading MPs. So I would say, on that basis, absolutely not. I think what we're seeing from Brandon Lewis here is obviously not that surprising. You know, he's a cabinet minister. He's also one of the ones who sort of, over the last few years, has seemed to be quite steadfast in his loyalty to Boris Johnson, like a lot of the cabinet, obviously. So it makes sense that he's saying things like this. However, I think it very much depends on what happens with the police investigation and if anything else sort of comes on after that. I mean, because we know that obviously Boris Johnson is a character. He does have, he has quite a propensity for sort of lying about things and making outrageous comments. Some people like that about them. But if you look at the polls, many people are beginning to hold those kind of character traits against him, especially when it comes to the multiple stories we've sort of heard about whether these parties happened, what they consisted of.
Yeah, sorry, Georgia. Isn't it interesting to sort of note, just, you know, that we're discussing this, whether, regardless of whatever the outcome of a police investigation into this row, this cabinet minister is saying that Boris Johnson will lead the Conservative Party. Whatever the outcome, if he is found to have broken the laws that he made, this cabinet minister is suggesting that he will be in charge. Isn't it slightly surreal that we're actually having the conversation about ifs and buts here?
I mean, yeah, somewhat. I don't know if anyone sort of expected this, you know, it to get to this extent. I think many other people in Boris Johnson's position would have already stepped down at this point out of respect for the situation. And I think I could definitely see a situation where, let's say he served a fixed penalty notice or whatever for being part of these gatherings during lockdown. I think we could, you know, definitely see a situation where a minister's just saying, okay, yeah, he's paid this fine, he said sorry, whatever, let's move on, as if it's not a big deal, as if, you know, during this time, everyone wasn't being told by his government and by himself in these press conferences to, you know, stay indoors, stay at home, etc.
I want to go on to another story this morning then, another political story. This from The Times. The Metropolitan Police is investigating death threats made against Sir Keir Starmer. These, of course, follow Boris Johnson's unproven claims that the Labour leader failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile. The Centre for Countering Digital Hate, which is a campaign group, passed on evidence to Scotland Yard of social media users on the app Telegram calling for Sir Keir Starmer to be executed. This is, of course, just a few days after Sir Keir Starmer was forced to flee a mob of far-right activists and anti-vaxxers outside Parliament last week. And it speaks to, I suppose, a real tension in politics, doesn't it, Georgia, in terms of the language used, the conversations had, and how that can escalate into real-life, threatening, worrying situations.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the Houses of Parliament, you know, many sort of harsh remarks are made and many, you know, marks that are bordering on the truth, bordering on being complete lies or sort of dalliancing with them at the least are made. And I think, you know, Keir Starmer has also made sort of controversial comments in regards to Boris Johnson. However, I think we can all say, you know, I was watching this live when he said this about basically blaming Keir Starmer for not prosecuting Jimmy Savile. I think it definitely stepped over the line. It's not true at all. And I think that, you know, this certainly sparked maybe a centering of backlash from some of these groups, because obviously this was a kind of conspiracy theory that is already, you know, I've seen it on Twitter and that kind of thing. But I think the Prime Minister saying it definitely sanctions some people to sort of take action. And like we saw last week, obviously those people personally mobbing Sir Keir Starmer outside Parliament, which obviously is, you know, things that you really do not want to be saying. And I think it's sad that people feel the need to make these threats. And I think especially with social media, people sometimes feel disconnected and they feel that they can say things like this and there won't be any consequences. Well, I'm afraid there are consequences to making death threats legally and morally. And I think, you know, I'm surprised, not surprised really actually, because probably, you know, people who are in Sir Keir Starmer's position in public life, they probably receive death threats every day. That's not to say that there shouldn't be consequences, but unfortunately I think that's the situation we're in. You just sort of have to deal with it.
It's worth noting as well, just on a kind of broader point on this, that it feels like we've been discussing for several years now, trying to take the sting out of politics. And of course there's back and forth, and of course there's debate, and there's argument, and there's disagreement. That is what makes politics so important and so fascinating, all of those things. But actually, over the last few years, the conversation has focused on trying to maintain those things without the risk of violence and threat and aggression. And I just don't know why that still exists, and how we've not done enough to kind of taper our language and monitor our own behaviour so as not to escalate these things in the world of crazy conspiracy theorists online who take these things so to heart and then take actual action on the streets or to make death threats in this circumstance. We're missing a beat here, aren't we, in terms of trying to remove the aggression that we've talked about for so long?
To an extent we are, but also in this specific comment from Boris Johnson, like I said, I was watching it live. To me, his remark, it seemed to be very desperate. He was scrambling for some kind of wittier response to Keir Starmer because this is obviously a situation where he was dealing with Partygate, the police investigation, obviously the initial Sue Gray report. He seemed to be in a desperate situation. He was scrambling for something, and I think it was very irresponsible for someone who is the Prime Minister to scramble for that, because it was just a very bizarre remark. And obviously we know what it's sort of let unfold has not been positive.
Yeah. Georgia, really interesting speaking to you this morning. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
That is Georgia Gilholy, political commentator and contributor to Young Voices UK.